This is Marc Strassman, reporter with Etopia News and the California Politics Today website. It's 1:15 p.m. on Thursday, the 26th of April, 2007. We're about to speak to Allan Hoffenblum, who is a well-known, prominent Republican campaign consultant. Welcome to Etopia News and the California Politics Today website.
Well, thank you very much.
We're going to talk about Senator John McCain and his campaign for the second campaign for the presidency. What did you make of his announcement yesterday that he was officially running for president?
Personally, I thought it was one of the better announcement speeches that I've seen of all the candidates so far who announced. It was very well written, very well delivered. I liked how he addressed the age issue, when he said, I may not be the youngest one running, but I'm the most experienced, which is going to be the thrust, I think, of his theme, that in a wartime footing and the dangers of the world, his age, his experience compared to Hillary or Barack could be an advantage. So we're looking forward to see a very spirited race by a lot of these candidates between now and when people start voting next year.
In 2000, he was an outsider, an independent candidate, and he attracted a lot of support on that basis. Can he use that approach this time?
I think things are so volatile right now. The world today is so dangerous. And I think the American people are so frightened of what's going on in the world, regardless of what your position is in Iraq or troop levels or what have you. No one's disputing, even the most liberal Democrat, this is a very dangerous world, and the discussion is what should be done to address it. And I think this nomination on both sides are really up for grabs. I do believe, though, those who are better known and have the most experience will have an advantage over some of the lesser-known candidates because there's so many involved. But what's interesting about John McCain and the support he received from independents, including a lot of Democrats, John McCain's always been a conservative Republican. He's always been pro-life on abortion. He's always been, pro-guns. He is basically a conservative Arizona Republican. But because of his maverick streak, there are a lot of Democrats who came to conclusions about McCain, and that basically they were overlooking his conservative record and were finding some qualities about him that I think transcended ideological politics. Now he's running for the Republican nomination, and he's being a little bit more outspoken on some of these conservative issues, and Democrats are thinking he is flip-flopping on some of those, where actually they're just becoming more aware of what the real John McCain's all about.
What's the dynamic for him in the moved up to early February California presidential primary of 2008?
Again, everybody can only surmise. First of all, here in California, this is the first time we've ever had a primary, on the first Tuesday in February. We've been trying a long time to try to have greater clout in presidential primaries. So twice we moved it to different dates in March, and it turned out to be a bust. So now we're trying the first, Tuesday in February, but all of a sudden now every other state in the nation seems to be doing the same thing, New York, Florida, Texas, and what have you. So we don't know how much we're really going to be able to play. And what's also brand new, as far as the February primary, the Republicans, for the very first time in decades, no longer have a winner-take-all. Back in the days when Ronald Reagan was governor and president and was on the national scene, the Republicans always made sure, knowing Reagan would always get the most votes, that he would get all the delegates regardless. But since then, they've changed the rules, and what it is winner-take-all in each of the 53 congressional districts in California, regardless the size or the number of Republicans in those districts. Here in California, the majority of the districts are held by a Democratic incumbent. And there are some congressional districts here that are more registered independents than there are Republicans. You go into Oakland and the Bay Area and San Francisco, Republican registration is down in the teens. Yet, whoever gets the most vote in that congressional district will get 3 delegates, the same way he would get in a very large, heavily Republican Orange County congressional district. So we got a brand new date, we got brand new rules. Everybody's looking at them, and nobody really knows what's really going to happen that day.
Does that mean that the vote of delegates would be very likely to be split up among all the candidates running?
They very well could be. You could just have it split up, 5 or 6 different ways. Also, what's somewhat still of an unknown factor, currently under current Republican Party rules, independent voters, or who we register what we call decline to state, meaning they don't join a political party, are not allowed to participate in the Republican presidential primary. On the Democratic side, they can. But right now, independents can't participate. Now, there are some in the Republican Party trying to change that. I think it could be a detriment. Their feeling is that the Republicans don't want independent voters in February. What makes you think they would vote for the Republican nominee come November? So there's an internal battle within the Republican Party to try to change that. I don't think they will, but still, that could be a factor.
How do you see Fred Thompson in terms of whether he's going to enter the race, and if he does, what kind of chances he'll have?
Again, your guess is as good as mine based on what I read. Let's put it this way. He's certainly very interested in looking at all his options. But whether he follows through on or not, I don't know.
Do you think that Senator McCain's age is a barrier to his being elected?
No, I really don't. I mean, I think Ronald Reagan kind of broke through that barrier. John McCain is really a legitimate American hero, and in his service in Hanoi Hilton. And I truly believe that this is going to be one of the most consequential presidential elections we've seen in a long, long time. I think the American people are taking a very serious look. And before we start anointing whether who's going to win and who's serious, let's start seeing what happens after some of these debates. I think the debates are going to be widely watched. We got the first one, tonight in South Carolina. The Republicans, I think next weekend are going to be at the Ronald Reagan Library, and they're going to start debating. So this is a campaign where I think the debates could be, over time, very important.
Okay, now I know you don't speak for Senator McCain, but I'd like you to really address the issue of him and the war and whether and how that's going to play out both in the Republican primaries and in the general election. I saw a clip yesterday that showed him on the The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. And Jon Stewart says, this is a civil war and it's not our country. And the audience applauded that statement. And then Senator McCain said, well, we know what side they're on. And then Jon Stewart came back and said, they're Americans. And I wanted to understand from you what you think Senator McCain's thinking was in essentially implying that the people who applauded Jon Stewart's statement that it's a civil war and it's not our country, whether they support al-Qaeda, whether they support the Sunnis, whether they support the Shia, or just exactly what Senator McCain is thinking when he apparently casts aspersion on those people who support Jon Stewart's statement that it's a civil war and essentially it's not the role of the United States to interfere there.
Well, first of all, that's an opinion held by many, but not by the majority of Republicans. I will not debate you that in face of any poll, the majority of the American voters believe that they don't want us to quit. They don't want an immediate pullout. They understand the consequences of that, but they tend to be favoring sort of a date specific or some type of a time withdrawal.
Well,
that's not true with the majority of the Republican voters. Now, as far as McCain's statement, I didn't see it. We all know about McCain's dry wit, and sometimes he says something that doesn't go over quite well, or it doesn't really mean what he implied. I think what he was basically saying is it's probably a very liberal group and a liberal crowd.
Right.
Where they're coming from. I don't think he was in any way criticizing their patriotism. But he's going to become the Republican nominee, and the war in Iraq. It's very different between registered Democrats and registered Republicans. I mean, John McCain, I'll be honest with you, could never get the Democratic nomination for President of the United States.
Right.
But I think he could get the Republican nomination. And as far as what the position of the war in Iraq is going to be come November 2008, no one really knows. We don't even know how the war is going to be perceived come next November.
Right. What I want to do is get your view as a Republican consultant about how the Republicans, as you say, who will be making the decision about who's the Republican nominee, how they feel about the war now. What's your take on how the Republicans feel about the war? And I guess that either means the congressional Republicans or all the people registered as Republicans, or exactly what? How does the Republican Party define its position on the war, and how do you see that position right now?
They're looking for a leader. Well, that's why Rudy Giuliani is going so strongly right now. In fact, most of the polls is in first place. I mean, you look here in California, and some of the individuals supported Rudy Giuliani. They are some of the most conservative Republicans here in this state. I know Republicans who are strongly pro-life, strongly opposed to gay marriage, very much involved in the social conservatism, but they're supporting Rudy Giuliani for president. The reason being is because they think we need a leader. They believe what is necessary is somebody who's going to lead this nation and effectively and properly fight the war on terrorism. That's what they're looking for, much more so than looking for some, individuals looking more on some of these more hot-button social issues. And so I think right now, it really is a contest between Rudy Giuliani and John McCain. Romney is perceived, people are confused about him because the positions he's taken running for president are so different than the positions he took when he ran for governor in Massachusetts that people are having trouble really putting a handle on him. Now, one of the key things that necessary, I'd be for either John McCain or Rudy Giuliani to get the nomination is that the social conservatives, those who will only support those who share those views, have to be able to rally behind a single candidate. So far, they've been unable to do that.
Is that why Fred Thompson's entry in the race could make a big difference?
It could, but Fred Thompson is not that conservative either. He certainly is a conservative. One of the key issues, by the way, that the political conservatives dislike about John McCain is the McCain-Feingold bill. That gets him livid. But Fred Thompson supported the McCain-Feingold bill when it was in the U.S. Senate. And I know his reputation. He's not perceived as a real hardcore bomb-throwing social conservative. So,
okay, I didn't know that. I didn't know that social conservatives were known for throwing bombs. I guess that's a metaphor.
That's a metaphor.
Okay.
Being a veteran, I know the difference between metaphors and real bombs, I can assure you.
Yes. What I want to focus on, though, is this question of Republican opinion about the Iraq War and how that's going to play out in the election, both within the party and in the general election. You just said that the Republicans, as you understand it, are supporting, the ones who are supporting Giuliani are doing so because they want, quote, a strong leader. The question is whether they have the same litmus test about a position on the war that they have on social issues, and whether that overrides their desire for a, quote, leader.
Yes, among many Republicans in the leadership here in California, that's exactly what is happening. They are more concerned about electing an individual who's going to be a strong leader of the President of the United States during what they perceive as a time of warfare. And that is, for many of the conservatives, becoming the dominant issue. Now, you've got to remember, if you look at polls, the majority of registered Republicans in the United States of America support Bush and the surge. Not the majority of the Americans, but the majority of Republicans do.
So does that mean that they will necessarily support the most pro-surge Republican candidate?
Well, first of all the Republican candidates for president are supporting the surge. There's not one, unless Chuck Hagel decides to get involved, and no one believes he is going to do so, mainly because Republicans so strongly disagree with his position. Chuck would do much better trying to get the Democratic nomination than the Republican. But there's a big difference between what the Republican majority think and what the nation as a whole thinks.
Right.
Right now, that's all of the Republican nominees pretty much support the surge, and pretty much McCain, where he's been most outspoken, is saying that Bush has done a horrible job. He and Rumsfeld in pursuing the war.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to understand this then. You're saying that the Republicans support the surge, and that the American people as a whole don't support the surge. What does that portend for the future prospects of success of whoever the Republicans nominate to support the surge that you've just said most Americans don't support?
2 years ago, most Americans supported Bush's effort, and that's why they re-elected him by one of the largest margins in history. Now, today, they don't. How do we know what's going to be the public opinion on the war in Iraq a year from now? Nobody really knows, because we don't know what the situation in Iraq is going to be. I'll guarantee you, if it's every bit as bad as it is now, you may be able to point that maybe no Republican get elected, but we don't know what the temper of the time's going to be come next year. It's a long ways away.
So you're saying...
and there's going to be a lot of things going on between now and November of 2008.
So are you saying then that the fate of the Republican nominee depends on the progress or lack thereof of the war in Iraq?
Yes, I'm saying that's probably true, yes.
And what do you and other Republicans feel are the possible scenarios according to which there would be a set of developments that would favor the election of a Republican?
that there is progress in the war in Iraq. And it doesn't look like the debacle, and it doesn't look like the killing that's going on as of today. But we don't know what George W. Bush and the military, what their successes are going to be. We don't know what's going to go on in Iraq. We don't even know what's going on. How do we know there's going to be another 9/11, God forbid, between now and next November? It's a very volatile time. Those who, live by the sword die by the sword, and I say that's the same with polls. Polls reflect a snapshot as to what the public opinion is today. It's not necessarily mean, because you're dealing with a swing vote. Now, there is a hardcore liberal Democrat who's been against the war since day one, always been against the war, will always be against the war, and will never vote Republican. But to be able to get the majority of voters agree with that, that means those are soft Democrat, independent voters, and some more moderate Republicans. Their views can change based on the circumstances at the time.
Okay, now we've just agreed that the fate of the Republican presidential nominee, whether it's John McCain or someone else, depends on what happens in Iraq.
Absolutely.
Back on Capitol Hill today, the House and the Senate passed a supplemental appropriations bill calling for a beginning of a phased withdrawal of U.S. troops starting October 1st, 2007. How does the politicking around that and the president's promised veto and the congressional response play into Republican presidential politics?
If everybody who agrees with the president's statement on the Republican side votes for either John McCain or Giuliani, one of those individuals will get the Republican nomination. Most Republicans support what Bush is doing, and they oppose what's going on the Democratic-controlled Congress. Remember, not everybody opposes the war, and those who do support what's going on overwhelmingly are Republican voters, particularly voters who participate in primaries and become delegates and what have you. So what's going on right now, as far as the position that Rudy and McCain and Romney and Brownback, what they're doing, they are diametrically appealing to voters that are totally different than those that Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and the Democrats are appealing to.
Okay, so
now, so who's going to win in November? It's going to depend. If the election was held today, I'll be the first one to admit a Democrat would become elected president of the United States, but the election is not being held today.
So in the same sense that the French have now given themselves a pretty clear choice between a center-left and a center-right candidate, you're saying that it's inevitable that the Republicans are going to nominate essentially a pro-war candidate, and we haven't talked at all about the Democrats really, but it's likely that they'll have a mostly a candidate who's anti-war to some extent, that there will then be a very clear choice for the American voters in November 2008.
Well, first of all, remember this. I don't want to get into pro-war, anti-war.
Right.
First of all, there's the war on. There's a difference of agreement among many Democrats who believe, strongly that the war on terrorism is important. The war in Afghanistan is important. In fact, many of them criticize that the war in Iraq and certainly the war in Afghanistan. There's few responsible Democrats who don't concur that there's a serious international war on terrorism that has to be fought. They just disagree in the manner in which strongly disagree in the manner in which George W. Bush is fighting this war, and that's including, many Republicans also, including John McCain. But the point I'm making is what the Republicans are looking at, regardless of they're not sitting there agreeing with everything George W. Bush does. They have some strong disagreements with what's going on in Iraq. But they do believe there needs to be a strong leader. And they need to be somebody who had proven that leadership. And so far, if you look at all the surveys, it's John McCain and Rudy Giuliani. And they're making the decision based on that leadership, not based on where their position on some of these hot-button issues, which has been in past Republican presidential campaigns have been the dominated issues.
Okay, one last question about leadership and McCain and the war. His experience has been, as you say, as a war hero for his courage in the Hanoi Hilton. Has he been involved with policy making at that level, other than saying that he really thought Rumsfeld was doing a bad job and wanted him out?
Well, first of all, he was a captain in the Navy.
Right.
And been a United States Senator sitting on key committees. Let's put it this way. When it comes to foreign policy and such, he certainly has as much, if not more, experience than Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton. And there's certainly, but when you're dealing with I feel when most people forget about the diehard partisans, those who will vote Democratic no matter what, or will vote Republican no matter what. No one can get elected with those voters by themselves. They have to have the crossover voters. And most voters that are looking for a president, they are looking for qualities that transcend individual issues, be it, and that's the person who's going to be elected, in my opinion, the next president of the United States. The one who looks like they have some type of vision, some idea, where they want to go, and have the intelligence and the qualities of leadership they're looking for. Now, it's interesting, get to the Barack Obama, one of the youngest and least experienced, but he's really, based on his rhetoric and some of his views, he's almost becoming the out-of-the-box candidate, meaning maybe what we need for president is something that's totally so much different than Bush, and that which we've had before, that in fact that he can become an effective unifying force. And it's interesting to watch his campaign because I think it's somewhat unique.
In terms of vision, what is John McCain's vision? I haven't heard much about it. He says his vision. He says if the U.S. pulls out of Iraq, there's going to be a bloodbath and genocide. But I haven't heard a sweeping global vision or domestic issues beyond some vague generalities.
Well, I don't. Well, you give me what the vision is on any of the other candidates, left or right, and maybe I'll go along with that line of thinking. It's, I assure you that I hope no candidate is going to come up and pull a Dick Nixon and says, I got a secret plan to end the war. I mean, listen, it's this war, everybody knows it's military, it's diplomatic, it's political, all of the elements involved. And I do not believe that if you're running for president of the United States, whether you like it or not, we only have one president, or we only have one commander-in-chief. And what McCain has basically said, let's see if this surge works. Now, I got to believe that if the surge does not work and the things just get worse, even President Bush will, start making changes and changing course. But who knows what the situation is going to be down the line. But this idea that they have to be there giving these grandiose speeches that have us, lend me your hand and I'll lead you to the promised land, that's more dangerous rhetoric than it is constructive.
Okay, I want to thank you very much for your analysis and comments, and I hope we can talk again as the campaign continues.
It would be fun to do so.
Thanks very much.
Okay, take care.